Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Threading the Needle, Keys to Balancing a Vibrant Workforce with Financial Success. My name is Aaliyah Pavla with Becker's Healthcare. On behalf of Becker's, thank you for joining us. Before we begin, I am going to walk through a few quick housekeeping instructions. First, we will begin today's webinar with a presentation and panel, and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log into today's webinar to access the recording. If at any time you don't see your slides moving or have trouble with the audio, try refreshing your browser. You can also submit any technical questions into the Q&A box. We are here to help. With that, I am pleased to turn the floor over to Rob Gamble, Director and Performance Practice Leader at the Chartis Group.
Welcome everyone to our webinar today, Threading the Needle, Keys to Balancing a Vibrant Workforce with Financial Success. Today we will focus on the importance of finding the right balance between workforce health and financial health. We'll not only discuss why it's important, but give you some tangible takeaways on how to strike the right balance in finding sustaining success as we accelerate out of the pandemic in the upcoming months and setting the stage for some of the big challenges in the upcoming years. And now I want to introduce our panelists. First is Mike Browning. Mike's the Chief Financial Officer at Ohio Health. In his role, he's responsible for managing the financial decisions across Ohio Health's growing health system and leveraging his experience in a value-based world to help the organization navigate the next generation of payment models and reimbursement. Mike brings nearly 30 years of healthcare finance experience to the discussion, and he's worked at a variety of levels across healthcare provider operations and finance, including facility, regional, and corporate level, and experience in for-profit, not-for-profit, small rural facilities, and large complex tertiary hospitals and IDNs. Welcome, Mike. Secondly, Wayne Frangesh is the Chief Human Resources Officer at Honor Health in Phoenix, Arizona. Welcome, Wayne. Wayne leads talent acquisition, retention, employee development, benefits and compensation, employee relations, and people strategy for Honor Health employees and physicians. Wayne has more than 20 years of HR experience across the industry. He's focused on aligning the HR strategies and priorities with the operational needs of the organization through continuous focus on strategic planning, staff, leadership development, labor productivity and efficiency, and process improvement. Wayne's also worked across both academic and integrated delivery network environments. My fellow partner, Pam Damsky. Pam's a director and co-leader of the performance practice with me at the Chartis Group. Pam has over 30 years of healthcare experience, the majority of which is in advisory services, and brings deep expertise in organizational strategy, alignment, clinical transformation, and performance improvement to help organizations succeed today while preparing for new and future environments. Most recently, Pam's been leading the development of our firm's financial performance improvement efforts and is focused on leading large multidisciplinary transformations for hospitals. Welcome, everybody. Very nice to see you all, and we look forward to the webinar today. Pam, I'm going to transition it over to you.
Thank you, Rob. So workforce has been an issue, a challenge for providers since before the pandemic. So taking you all back to 2019, at the time, healthcare employment was projected to grow 15% over 10 years, which equates to about almost 2.5 million more jobs. So a lot more employment, a lot more job opportunities, and a lot of positions that have to be filled. In addition, we've seen an increase in turnover. So in 2016, it was about 15% of the workforce would turn over in any given year. In 2019, just 4 years later, it was up to 19%. That's close to 1 in 5 positions turns over every single year. So we knew managing a workforce and managing that turnover was an issue before the pandemic even started. Then 2020 hit and the pandemic, and we've seen those challenges just be exacerbated. A recent study, and I think this is one of many we're going to see in the future, showed that 39% of frontline healthcare workers in New York City last spring screened positive for symptoms of either post-COVID or COVID-19 related PTSD or major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. Each one of those individually was anywhere from 23 to 27%, but combined, it's 40%. So that's 1 in every 2 to 3 people was finding that they had a pretty significant emotional issue that they were managing. So it's no surprise then that a recent survey showed that 40% of healthcare workers are considering leaving the field after the pandemic. So that turnover issue of 19% is just likely to go up. So that's on the sort of turnover side. If you think about it from a quality perspective, we're also seeing the challenges there. A recent survey, and this survey came out 2 weeks ago on May 1st, of over 700 critical care nurses, they did a review and found that for those nurses who were self-reported that they were in poor physical or mental health, had a 20% higher occurrence of medical errors than those who reported themselves in good health. So we're seeing challenges in just care delivery by the fact that our workforce has been so stressed. In addition, a lot of conversations have been happening about quality metrics. A lot of folks have been talking about the increase in some of the metrics that we measure quality by. So there's been an increase in CAUTI and CLABSI, and recent data has shown this. Some have attributed it to the operational changes that were made due to COVID or the antibiotics that were given to COVID patients, making them more susceptible. But I also believe that there is an increase due to the physical and emotional stress that have been placed on our workforce, and that our workforce has been working under has caused some of this. So what are the implications for all of that? Well, we're seeing that some of our providers, as we talk to organizations across the country, they've actually had a challenge keeping beds open or reopening the same procedural areas that they had closed during parts of the pandemic. They're finding it's hard to open some beds because they just don't have the staff. And what happens then is you get into this somewhat downward cycle. If you are trying to spread your staff to open up more beds, or some organizations are asking their teams to do mandatory overtime or stretching and saying, well, we can see one more patient on this unit. That's just causing more stress for those who are already there and who have stayed there. So if you're not careful, you can create this really challenging cycle that becomes harder and harder to break free from. One way that people are breaking free from that is the use of travelers and agency nurses. And that we've seen a significant increase in. In fact, their agency companies and traveling nurse companies have reported a 30 to 40% increase in the demand for their services. And I expect recent numbers will show even higher numbers than that in some cases. Well, that just ends up creating teams where you've got members of the team who are new and have to learn the organization and learn the operations of that particular area where they're filling in. but it also creates huge challenges on the financial side because the cost for agency and traveling nurses have only gone up as well. And we're seeing and hearing about rates for these staff that have gone up. They were already well above what we pay staff nurses, but paying an outside agency, those prices have gone up upwards of 50% in some cases. In overall, there have been estimates that the costs for burnout-related nursing turnover are estimated to be $14 billion on an industry that has suffered significant financial challenges over the course of the past year. Just a $14 billion incremental cost to be managed when everyone is trying to work through volume, getting their volume back. So what do you do about it? What we're seeing in a lot of organizations is this balance of a balancing act that you have. And so on the left here of our balancing act are those employee human resource related programs. So things like engaging employees and thinking about how to make employees feel part of the team and feel valued. Some of that has been through offering expanding the support and wellness programs that organizations are offering. Training and education by demonstrating that you are committed to your employees' growth and that you are committed to their professional development. Having recruiting practices that focus on what candidates want, which is what we know they are interested in speed, they are interested in responsiveness, and they are interested in obviously competitive wages. So being able to offer that. Leadership development is one of the biggest areas, I believe, because there's actually a very high correlation, let's put it that way, between high degrees of employee engagement as a result of the manager of a unit or of a department who creates an environment with high engagement and low turnover. So if you can help your managers be good and they get the training and the development they need to manage their teams well, then you have a higher chance of lower turnover for that particular unit. Non-financial rewards and recognition, again, helping employees feel valued and part of the team. Having leadership structures that enable growth, so a high-performing employee can see their future in the organization. And finally, communication and change management. There's been so much happening across organizations for giving your employees the opportunity to understand and be communicated with in the way they want to hear that information and with messages that they can understand and appreciate becomes critically important. The tools on the financial side to manage workforce are things like managing to productivity targets, having defined targets for each department, whether they are a volume-based department or a fixed-based department. What are you managing towards and what are you expecting your managers to manage their staff toward? Giving them the tools through things like flexible pay practices that support having the staff available to fill those vacancies and to fill that shift-specific need when you need it. Really understanding what the volume drivers are and having those analytics to understand when is it likely that I may need more staff, or when can I feel comfortable that I don't need that staff on that one shift. Other things are really taking a very fine view at your roles and your workflow design, potentially with automation, to make sure you are valuing your employees by helping them focus on those things that they need to do and not those things that either can be automated or tasks that can be streamlined or given to other teams that are putting other workforce members where they are managing to their best ability. compensation and financial incentives, making sure you're aligned on the work and it's market driven, and you've got, again, demonstrating value just through compensation, and having the tools and technologies so that you are reporting on all of this and measuring productivity. So you've got the targets, but you're giving people feedback of how well they're doing, or you're giving people feedback on how well they're managing to their own staffing mix or their own staffing grid. And finally, governance structures and processes. This is, what are the processes you have in place to help fill vacant positions, but ensuring, and especially in these challenging times, that you are only filling those vacancies that you need. When positions become open, it's not an automatic refill of the position, but that you've got very data-driven criteria to make sure you are only putting those positions out to be filled that provide the most value to the organization. So these are just the set of different solutions that we wanted to highlight. For any organization, it's not a magic answer. It's what each organization has the ability to do at any one point in time. Really depends on the specifics of that organization's circumstances. But there's, a balance between what do you do managing on the financial side with what do you do managing on the employee investment side that has to be determined for each organization. So what we're excited about today is we're going to hear from our panelists who are managing this complex balancing act to understand their perspectives. So we've got two unique organizations and the vantage points of two individuals from different executive roles that we're going to hear from. But before we get to that, we actually want to hear from you. So we are going to do a poll, and we're going to bring up the options here, and there's 10 options listed. And what we would ask you to do is just click on the boxes of 3 out of the 10 of your top 3 biggest areas of focus or concern to understand what you all are focused on these days. So we'll give it a few seconds to give you a chance to read through the 10. I won't read them to you, and to pick your top 3. Okay, let's see the result. Oh, I think we're still waiting till we have a few more submissions. So please pick 3 so we can use these to include in our discussion. I see that we're still having folks report. Thank you very much for participating. We appreciate it. All right, so let's look at our results. So managing employee engagement and satisfaction and staffing levels to productivity targets are our top answers. They're tied at almost 47%. Along with that then is optimizing roles and workflows to increase delivery and flexing staffing to demand, and filling immediate vacancies. Yes, that is number 3 on the hit parade. Obviously, again, the need to be able to keep beds open, procedural areas open, staff critical function.
It's a very interesting result, right?
Yes.
Our top 2 are one on each side of the equation: employee engagement and satisfaction, and managing staffing levels to productivity targets. Great segue over to our panel. Wayne and Mike, you guys, I'm sure, are focused on a lot of these same challenges. What What are you guys focusing on now, and how might it be different from when and where it was before the pandemic? Wayne, why don't you go first to
that? In many ways, the 2021 isn't that different than 2019. We're focused on recruiting talent and retaining talent, and this in our primary service area and the Scottsdale Phoenix market, it's such a growth area. So you're competing against obviously our other labor competitors in the market, but just the supply as well. So for us, it's really focusing on those basics. We surveyed our staff in 2019, did well in that press gaining engagement space. So we certainly went into 2020 with a highly engaged staff and really a growth focus. And certainly, obviously the pandemic certainly changed 2020 for all of us. But in many ways, our focus is the same. We're in a growth mode, and being able to staff that growth is really critical for us.
Thanks, Wayne. Mike?
Yeah, Rob, I agree with Wayne. I think the three key things we focus on and always will focus on will be retention, recruitment, and total rewards. One thing that's a little different now than probably in the past is we look at our spend on our employees as an investment. We look at capital spend, and we spend $200 to $300 million a year in capital, and we always look at that as an investment. But we look at the income statement, we always look at people as an expense. And so going forward, we're really trying to focus on the investment and making sure we make the investment the right way. I'll quote a couple of our CEOs. So our former CEO is Dave Blum. He retired a couple of years ago. Dave would tell you that culture was our secret sauce. It was really the backbone to the success of the organization. And I've only been here 2 years, and I will tell you my experience in the 2 years is Dave was right. Culture is really what got us through COVID and really helped us thrive through COVID. But it didn't come easy. We didn't just magically get through COVID because of our culture. Culture is something you have to work constantly on. So the first week that COVID hit and our electives stopped, our current CEO, his name's Dr. Steve Markovich. Dr. Markovich, to give you a little background, is also a fighter pilot and a retired general in the Air Force. So he brought in a lot of war analogies with COVID because there are a lot of similarities. But his three key tenets, which we're going to take care of our people physically, emotionally, and financially. So physically was make sure they have the PPE they need. We create the safest environment possible for our employees and our patients. Emotionally, many of us have never gone through what COVID brought to us. So we need to provide the emotional support that associates need, not only from a work environment, but also from a personal environment, because people are going through personal challenges as well as work challenges. And financially, we chose not to lay any person off, not to furlough any person. We were paying people to sit at home because we knew it was the right thing to do. And fortunately, as a strong healthcare organization, we could afford to do that. So those were three key tenets. And I'll also say financially, we paid bonuses to our associates after COVID. We not only paid bonuses, we doubled bonuses because there were a lot of associates that were in financial stress. And so we wanted to make sure that we took care of our associates that way. Because our CEO is a former general, I'll use a war analogy. We had a lot of surgeons who previously worked in wars that were going through COVID, and they said COVID was worse than wartime experience. And the reason was, when they were focused on a wartime environment and the challenges with that, they knew that it would come to an end, meaning they knew the replacement would come in a day, 3 days, 5 days. COVID, these people were working 30, 16-hour days. COVID was not stopping, so it's been a real challenge to our people overall. And so we took that very seriously as we thought about where we are today. And we have an initiative today with recovery and resiliency. And so really trying to focus on making sure that our employees can recover from COVID and be resilient. They dealt with more death in the last 15 months than they probably have in their career. And the illness that they saw was traumatic. So really, we believe recovery is probably the next 12 to 24 months to get back to stability of where we need to be. And that's where the investment comes in. It's not the traditional invest in retirement plans and health insurance. It's how we invest in those other tangible areas that our associates can feel like we're taking care of them. And I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but it's really those investments will pay off down the road, and how organizations manage these turbulent times will determine their success in the future.
Thanks, Mike. Wayne, how are you guys handling the investment side, at Honor Health? Is it similar, or are you doing some different things than what Mike was discussing?
I think a lot of similarities. We're at an interesting point because you make decisions in terms of where you potentially expand. In this market, you could go virtually every direction. Your only limiter is probably the mountains, I guess, that border us. So I think we're having different discussions on not just the funding and financial capital, but the human capital. And you may have some great ideas in terms of new services to offer, but how far can you spread your staff, thin to make all those things happen? So I think there's a real balancing that's occurring probably at better levels than maybe we did prior, because we still have a workforce that we're short, but it's also a team that's just very tired right now. It was a very difficult year. We want to make sure folks get time off that they potentially didn't do in 2020, A, because we needed them, and B, because you couldn't necessarily vacation and go anywhere. So this year is very much focusing on kind of that pause and cleansing breath to make sure we're thinking about our well-being, we're thinking about having time off, and then really being deliberate on kind of what we call our honor strategies, and thinking about, okay, what do we do to provide services for the community, understanding that it's not just the bricks and mortar, it's really having the individuals there to provide the care. And so it's been, for us, I think it in some ways it changes your strategies and your planning, and it probably always should have been this way, not just the financial and the construction piece, but also the staff that complement that and make it happen. And if we didn't realize it before, I certainly think this last year made us, even more appreciate and recognize the resilience of our team, but also understand you can't expect, that level. There has to be some balance there for everyone, and that's important for us to maintain.
Yeah, thank you. Mike, definitely appreciate the CFO investing in the people. No question about it. That's a nice trend for CFOs to hear, right?
Well, Rob,
question from the audience. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say they're our most important resource. And, sometimes we as CFOs forget about that. We're always looking at growth and what we need to do, but we have to understand people drive that growth. Absolutely.
Thanks. Pam, a question came in from the audience asking if there's any relative difference in some of the statistics to the non-clinical staff. I'm not sure if you have any specific perspective on that.
Thanks, Rob. It's a great question. The studies haven't been done as much with the non-clinical staff. However, the challenges with attrition and turnover are equally high, in some cases, if not higher, because when you think about your non-clinical staff, for some of your frontline workers, there are entry-level jobs now that are offering much more competitive wages than they have in the past. So anyone in a market with an Amazon hub nearby has seen that their frontline staff often can get more competitive wages rather than being in Central Sterile, for example, working for Amazon. Others include the competition. If you think about all of the positions, all of the non-clinical positions that have gone remote, and so many organizations have so many staff that have gone remote, the competition now becomes national. You don't need to have staff that are in your market if everyone's remote. So your staff are being recruited nationally, and in fact, you have the opportunity to recruit nationally for the same type of talent. So I believe the same pressures are there, and the need to create engagement and connection with staff.
Great.
So our next question for our panel is, we've talked about sort of what you're doing currently, but I'm going to ask you to put on your prognosticator hat and think about looking toward the next few years. What do you see as what the workforce environment is going to look like for healthcare providers? What do you see as changing in the industry in the near term, or look like fundamentally different in the future?
So I'll start, Pam. I'm a little older than Wayne, so I've been through these cycles quite a bit. We go through labor shortages pretty frequently. I think what we'll see in the next 3 years is something that we haven't seen before. I believe there will be a lot of healthcare workers opting out of the healthcare environment, whether I'm not just talking nurses and doctors, I'm talking the support staff and others because of what they've gone through. And we have to be prepared for that. That's why I believe the investment is important to our people. This is where organizations will be separated. You will have organizations, as Wayne talked about, what they're doing in Phoenix and what Ohio Health is doing in Columbus, and making those investments the right way and being prepared for that. And we believe if we have the right strategies today and over the next 3 years, our challenges will not be as severe as some others. And so that's where that investment comes in. And I'll give you an example. We spend a little more on our people at Ohio Health than the average not-for-profit entity. We spend about 54 cents of each dollar we collect on our people, and that's salaries and benefits. We're bumping that to 56%. So we're moving that up in our next year budget, which starts on July 1. And so we're putting a little more into our people side of it, and it's done intentionally. Now, we're not compromising margin, Rob, so don't get on me about, Browning's giving up on margin, because we're not, because we're squeezing others. We're going through, and I know some of our vendors are on the phone. They'll get squeezed, and purchase services and supplies and trying to manage better, but we're not doing it at the expense of the margin. We're taking some of the non-essential expenses out of the system and putting it into the people the best way we can. So it's really a reallocation of resources. But in 3 years, I do expect that we will all still face those challenges. We'll have agency, we'll have overtime, we'll have people selecting out of healthcare, and it's something we'll have to be prepared for, and the best time to prepare for it is today.
And Wayne, how about you?
I would echo many of Mike's comments. I think for us, the last year accelerated, whether it was we went from a few hundred remote staff to a few thousand remote staff, and accelerated our telehealth approach that was gaining momentum, but really it was forced into action quicker. I think understanding in many ways 3 years from now, I don't see the cycles of the shortages. I don't know if there's a natural end to the cycle in this market, given the population growth, and much of the population growth here isn't necessarily relocating critical care nurses from other markets. It's often retirees or others who are coming here. So it's in many ways it's rethinking the work. It's we've just started discussing automation more. We've started discussing other kind of process improvements and things of that nature, and certainly leveraging the telehealth, because it's not and those aren't replacements for labor. Those are really complements, understanding that if we can't find that person, let's at least bring those tools and other resources in to support that person who's potentially not at the full staffing complement we'd like to see. It certainly is to try to look in the future. It's even us going back to understanding those feeder programs for the future workforce and really getting folks interested in the industry again. I think this last year, like the comment earlier, individuals are leaving the industry. And how do you, for an industry that was, healthcare was really valued and in many ways appreciated like it hadn't been and should have been for years, how do we get those folks who are in elementary, middle school, and high school to be thinking about, healthcare careers? All those things are really, for 3 years and beyond, really going to be critical for us.
Thanks. Yeah, one thing I did see, I don't have the statistics, but I remember seeing that there has been an increase in applicants to some of the clinical schools. So that is a little bit of a good news, but whether or not, I don't think it'll ameliorate the entire problem. One of the things, Wayne, you mentioned automation and rethinking the work. One of the other things we've talked with a lot of people about is using some of the processes around workforce management of having and managing those productivity targets and helping managers manage to demand, because so many have changed. That's not something that just comes automatically, but giving managers those tools so that they're not needing extra people and having folks sit around and having that variation in their days, but you create more constancy in here's the level of work we have and here's the staff to do it. has also seemed to be helpful, and something that tends to, in some ways, people learn it, but then when there's turnover at the management ranks, sometimes that knowledge and ability to manage goes away. So constantly reinforcing that. I don't know if either of you have found that in your own organization.
Certainly have, and I think it's an area that actually I think Honor Health was in a strong position, prior to 2020 in terms of the tools and a general leadership understanding of things like work hour per unit of service type metrics. I think the other advantage we have that took years to build was a very deep kind of system-wide or network-wide kind of flow pool of staff who go multiple sites. And that is really, when we think about managing costs, it's often that unexpected absence or fluctuation in volume that you're often throwing special premiums at. Decisions were made years ago to really plan for that. And that's really helped us in the last year, but in many ways gives leaders that fallback of, okay, I've had a spike in volume, I can go to a central resource to help staff and complement that. Or if the volume's dropped, to use that to deploy to other sites. But really thinking beyond your own department, that takes time for everyone to learn and understand that for sure.
Right.
Pam, we're using automation in both revenue cycle, accounts payable, a lot of the back office functions to be able to help us manage those processes better. That's not unique, but our teams are also putting together automation to do predictive analysis for staffing, and it really has helped in the nursing side. It's given nursing a good argument to sometimes what we would say overstaff in preparation for what's coming, and having data to support it. And so that's unique. That's the first time I've experienced that as a CFO, and it really does present a compelling argument to staff appropriately in how we go about it. And if we do that correctly, we may be able to mitigate some agency cost, overtime, and other costs.
Oh, that's awesome. Terrific. Thank you. So now we're going to ask our audience what you all think. So we're going to bring up our next poll. Do you feel that this pattern of challenging attrition rates can be broken and challenging turnover? We'll give everybody, this is an easy one. It's just a yes, no, or not sure. We'll give everybody a few seconds to click on the one they believe. We'll see how hopeful everyone feels. We'll ask our team if we have enough responses that we can show this result. We're going to give it a few more seconds. Okay, let's see our results. We've got 40% of you are hopeful, third not so sure, and 26%, no, not so much. Okay, thanks. Rob, you want to?
Yeah, I guess we were hoping for maybe a little bit more positive thinking, but I guess as we've been talking about so far for the first 40 minutes, we're coming out of a pretty dark period. And so I guess we shouldn't be surprised that some of that thinking has clouded, whether we think we can, tackle some of these big challenges. Mike, Wayne, what do you guys think? Do you think we'll be able to break out of this cycle? And what do you think it would take to do that? And what challenges do you see? Mike, you want to take first crack?
Yeah, well, Rob, first, I'm appreciative that you're optimistic. I'm not used to that with you, so that's great. What I will say is that I hope it stabilizes soon, not soon, but over the period of time. I don't think it will get a lot better just with the environment that we're in. So I'm probably a little more pessimistic like some of the others, but there are ways to improve it. And a few of those, and Wayne touched upon several of them. The one I'll point out will be the pipeline. I think we can do a better job getting people in the pipeline for all the jobs in healthcare and selling the profession to college students, high school students, and others. And that's work that we've got to do that will have a long-term impact. One initiative we have that we've had for a number of years, but recently got elevated, is diversity and inclusion. And so we've always had a diversity strategy, an inclusive strategy, but now inclusion is one of our core values. And we are recognized locally as being a leader in that area. So we know we can attract talented people because of the way we treat people. We want to be inclusive. An example is for each job opening in Ohio Health, we strive to have two persons of color for every opportunity to at least be considered. And we work really hard to do that, and that's not easy, but we really want to be an environment that is for all. And I think once we open those doors and people see us being a welcoming organization, that will help us meet some of the needs for the future. And the last is being creative, and we talked about this separately in a lot of meetings, is that we're working on a foreign nurse program. We've never done this before, but we'll bring in some foreign nurses who speak English and do well, are high quality, high service oriented, and see if that program works. And so we're all going to have to be creative. That's not extremely creative, but sort of thinking out of the box going forward versus what we've done historically, but just trying to be innovative as we move forward.
Wayne, how about you?
Echo much of what Mike has commented on. I think certainly we have a renewed effort in our diversity, equity, and inclusion, both from a workforce perspective and culturally competent care and our focus on the social determinants of health for the community. I think that's been impactful. In the nutrition space, for us, it's really to rethink. I think HR historically kind of looked at those macro turnover numbers. We often look at a first-year turnover number, and it's kind of just a number. And for us, it's to rethink kind of how we look at that data and realizing that our early career staff who are leaving for much different reasons than someone in the middle of their career or later in their career. And part of what we're thinking in the total rewards framework is more flexibility for some of those generational differences and needs, especially in a market like this where it's in the non-clinical areas, highly competitive in the hospitality industry and others. And the base wage is driving decisions, not just outside of healthcare, but within healthcare with our competitors. And understanding that potentially our new grads in their early career have a much different needs in terms of retirement planning now or benefit packages than someone who's been here 20 years. So I think that truly trying to understand at the core of it still, just looking at exit data we received in the last few days, it's the supervisor relationship is driving it. So continue to develop our leaders, understand that they're going to be the retention kind of key for us. HR, owns the stats, but ultimately the leader on the floor who's doing that evaluation right now with that staff member, that interaction is what's driving that more than anything, and making sure that we're giving that feedback. And especially this year, we've emphasized really very much a thank you for the last year. Staff just stepped up in every single opportunity and to make sure they understand how well that's been appreciated and recognize that. So certainly I think, there's this, in some ways, can you drive the turnover number down? You can over time, but it's not necessarily a radical change. It's just focusing on those relationships with the leader and the folks they work with.
Yeah. We've all heard and read a lot about the future of work and how COVID has impacted how people, view working from home versus, the traditional commute to the office or to the workplace. Do you guys think that will help some of these turnover challenges? Do you think it will hurt in that, some people that perhaps used to associate themselves with just your organization now, could be recruited from, in some cases anywhere, right? Because they can still work from their desktop at home. I'm interested in your perspective on that, Mike.
Rob, it's a great question, and I think the answer is yes to both. I think it will help and hurt. It'll provide us some opportunities to recruit, but we are losing some really good talent because they have the ability to earn a larger income, maybe work for a New York company and earn that type of income but live in Columbus. And so I received an email yesterday from one of my leaders who had some concern, and his comment was, we have lifers who are leaving, meaning people we thought would be here forever. And I think that is somewhat concerning, but we want people to make the right decision for themselves. What we're trying to do, especially in the support side, because a lot of that's where people work from home, rethinking how we operate. So Pam talked about innovation and how we use technology and using some of that to help. But also, do we need to replace positions, especially from the support side? When I said we're going to invest more in our people, we plan to reduce corporate overhead to a certain extent so that we can invest in the care sites. So while we're disappointed that people are leaving, and it is troubling, we're also trying to see it as an opportunity. Can we reallocate the work or do things different in how we can manage?
Great. Wayne, what do you think?
The kind of the move to remote work has been interesting for us. I think in this market, commute time was often a dissatisfier. And a year ago, the commute times changed radically. So and for many folks who used to spend 8 to 10 hours a week on the road going to and from work, they're now home and often working those times. So we actually, when we balanced the remote and productivity piece, we actually saw probably an uptick because folks were able to even work more because they weren't spending time on the road. I do think it is changing how we're, you're competing now on a national, even larger scale. But it has opened some doors for us. We've just kind of kicked off our understanding and kind of out-of-state employment that we really shied away from prior, but understanding that to be in the labor market today, you have to have that flexibility. But also then how do we develop and train our leaders to manage a remote workforce is really something we've tried to invest in this last year and help, because leaders used to be able to walk, in a department and see their team. And now it's either through this kind of, a virtual or those chances to interact. So it's the move to remote, I think, has helped us and will help us kind of retain over time, but it also adds new challenges on how do you engage that staff and how do you retain them if they don't feel that same connection.
Great. Pam, you had a follow-up you wanted to do?
I did. Thanks, Rob. One of the things that you've both talked about is the need to really understand what your staffs want and how this past year has changed in some cases what is important to different members of your team, of the different teams that you have. I'm curious because we know that having that information is incredibly valuable, but we've also heard from some folks that they just don't want to put the burden of additional surveys on folks at this point in time because they're so busy and covering so much. How have you all thought about the employee engagement surveys and in collecting that information over the past year? Either one of you can start.
I can comment. Yeah, thanks. I think we actually did a fair, I would say, shorter pulse surveys throughout kind of last spring and the summer in 2020 to just make sure we were hitting the mark on what our staff needed at that time. Last spring, HR reacted quickly and tried to solve the daycare issue for every employee in the organization, and within a few weeks realized that wasn't necessarily something to solve. We had other mechanisms. So it was more of a just making sure we're responsive to the needs of the time. Staff are looking for help in terms of balance, in terms of having meals to bring home, and in terms of a lot of those things to balance now, often having kids not in school or other kind of home dynamics. So for us, it was really kind of doing that pulse on how they were feeling, whether it was the burnout or resources they needed, so that we react properly versus just trying to guess what they needed. And we had a larger kind of pulse survey with Prescani in the fall, which was helpful. But we always kind of balance that. You don't want to over-survey, but I think our staff realized we were asking the questions so that we could respond with the right kind of solutions. So, and we'll continue to do that. I think that's important for us because things were happening so quickly in the last year. You were jumping to solutions before you knew what the problem was. And I think that was important for us to keep that kind of that feedback loop constant.
And from an Ohio Health perspective, Pam, we've mirrored the same thing. We did a pulse survey, just a brief survey to understand what our employees needed. And then secondly, we did a full-blown survey in the spring, which we're waiting for the results, but we really pushed hard to get feedback. And we actually had an 80% response rate, which is great, that employees wanted us to hear. We're anxious to see those results because that's how we'll plan for the next year and what changes we may need to make. But one thing Wayne said that's really important was we sometimes think we know what they need. During COVID, some of our associates just wanted a hotel room. They didn't want to go home because they had treated patients. They didn't want to worry about taking COVID home, and just some of the basic things that we never would have thought of, they were bringing to us, and that's how we were trying to meet their needs at least quickly. And I think whether it's surveys, listening to associates, rounding, all the things we can do to make sure that we're listening is important.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we've got 10 minutes left. I want to thank our awesome panel. Pam, Mike, Wayne, thank you so much for your insight and for your guidance to the audience. We're going to take some questions now. I have a good one here that I'd like to ask, and really this is Mike. I'll ask this one to you because you're a new age CFO. So the question comes from an audience member. The analogy of capital as an investment and people as an expense is very well put. What advice do you have for dealing with health system finance groups whose slogan is no margin, no mission, when experiencing ever-tightening productivity targets? Employee engagement and sometimes even quality seems to take a back seat. How do you balance?
You know, I guess I'll go with what Sister Jane Berger told me early on in my career: no mission, no margin. And I think they do go hand in hand. And I think the time that we're in, margin is important, but the values of the organization and mission are more important. And we as CFOs have to think less about the stick and more about the carrot and how we manage and how we go about things. And that's where we try to squeeze other things. And as an example, when COVID hit, rather than lay people off, you know, we cut $100 million of non-essential expenses in our fourth quarter, which is April through June. And it's just being creative and innovative and really operating as a team. You know, the CFO often can sometimes be considered the dictator and pushing people on what they have to do. And we're really part of the team in making the decisions. We're an important part of the team because, you know, we control the purse strings, but CFOs have to worry less about quarter-to-quarter results, worry more about long-term results. Because my goal is to hand this off to someone in better shape than I inherited it, and we're going through a pretty turbulent time. So I always go back to what Sister Jane taught me, and usually it works out more times than not.
Well, you're a smart man quoting Sister Jane. I would never want to go against Sister Jane, I'm sure. Wayne, next one's for you. In terms of how are you handling staffing needs with the increase in demand due to backlogs of services and patients that we're seeing, you know, from the COVID recovery wave? We are getting pressure to hire more staff because of increases in volume, but is that really the solution?
I think it's part of it's to understand that, you know, is it going to be sustainable volume or is it a blip? I mean, we last year, like many organizations, had to aggressively bring on travelers. And it wasn't, you know, we had gotten to the point probably the year prior where we really did not have travelers or agency in our buildings, but knew that this was a pocket of time where we had to flex up as Arizona had some significant spikes in obviously our COVID numbers. The balancing that was always the your kind of your surgery volumes and what you're able to do certainly early in COVID and what is an elective surgery versus something that's more urgent. I think there is what we've really tried to focus on as this volume has been sustained is more in that central kind of float pool model to really have staff who can potentially be in multiple spots and flex to the volume if you are going to be adding to build in that flexibility. And certainly you compensate and make sure that's an understanding coming in. But I think for us, it's been, as we've seen this volume and it's sustained, to then as we're adding to really, and certainly have tried to, as part of our own financial recovery, really limit the fixed adds in terms of those that are kind of more overhead or support related and really been adding in those variable positions on the volume. But I think to build into that plan, the flexibility of being available, if you are in a multiple site kind of system, I think that's critical to be able to adapt to the volume swings.
Great advice. Thanks, Wayne. Mike, the next one's for you. How do you maintain that great culture or develop a team when more of your workforce is remote?
I wish I had the right answer for this, because we are making it up as we go, and I think it's important, and we will make mistakes as we go along the way. But what we've started with, and we started this sometime back, is education, and it's teaching leaders like myself on how to manage people who are working from home or working remotely. And that education is really important to us to understand how to manage that. It's also listening. All too often we as leaders want to tell people what to do versus listen to what they have to say. And I think listening to people is important, especially on these types of communication devices, because people do have something to say, and sometimes silence, you can get people to speak up. Also having small sessions where you're listening. And lastly, I would say there's a lot more to it, but flexibility. We have call centers that we have people work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and here's when you're going to work. And we have to listen to our associates, because they may need to work flex schedules. They may need to work 10-hour days. And we have to get out of the way we have operated when we were all together in this new environment and be flexible. And that is hard for some leaders to adjust to. And so as senior leaders in the organization, really any leader, you always have to ask the 5 whys. Why are you doing it? And make sure that people understand it's not just because of the way we've done it. And I did say that was the last one. I got one more is, it's etiquette. It's etiquette on these types of meetings, as we're in a room together and our senior team has come back together, and we do have people who are on the screen. We have to give them respect and give them the ability to ask questions just like they're in the room, whether they're one of us or there's somebody presenting, how it may work out. So, but we are learning as we go. We get a little better each month, and I think over time we'll get as good as we can at this.
Thanks, Mike. Wayne, one last question for you. How are you balancing productivity metrics and the fact that we have very complex patients with more inexperienced nurses? Many CNOs are reporting high percentages of new grads and travelers. How does that impact your challenges?
I think it's interesting. We had a culture that wasn't as open to new grads historically, and I think we've really rethought that over the last year, and I think in a positive way. But it was also making sure we had the right resources for preceptoring and clinical education and all those things to make sure someone's onboarded appropriately. I think part of that is just having that. You certainly build into your metrics some of that training piece and the vacation, sick holiday, all those type factors. But then you also have to understand if you've got your typical med surg unit, which is really heavy in a new grad, that you're going to have some variance there. And that is to use the term investment in the future, because it is to hold out for that person with 10 years of experience walking through your door every day. Let's give someone an opportunity and let's invest in them and give them a chance to see what they can do. But I think there has to be some flexibility into it. It's not, you often make it up in other areas as well when you have more of a focus on the new graduates in a certain unit. But I think the leaders need to know, or I think we need to let them know that they'll be supported in trying to develop that future workforce. So there just needs to be some flexibility and some understanding that there may be those variances for a period of time as folks are getting kind of on the ground.
Great. Well, we've got 1 minute left. Aaliyah, I'll hand it back over to you, but first I'll thank all the participants, and I'll thank the panel one more time. Mike, Wayne, Pam, thank you so much. We really appreciate the terrific discussion and the great feedback and advice for the audience. Thank you all.
Thanks, Rob. That is all the time we have for today. I want to thank our speakers for an excellent presentation and the Chartis Group for sponsoring today's webinar. To learn more about the content presented today, please check out the resources section on your webinar console and fill out the post-webinar survey. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you have a wonderful afternoon.